one of the problems in Iowa is this is the third cycle in a row that they've had kind of big problems and some controversies about how things were handled. In 2012, there were initial reports that I believe Romney won the Republican caucuses, and it turned out it was Rick Santorum. But Santorum was denied the boost, the bump of having been declared the winner. In 2016, there was an incredibly close result, and they didn't release the raw totals of how people who showed up for the caucuses lined up on the Democratic side. That caused a lot of concern and controversy, and now you have this. And so the Iowa Democratic Party should have practiced maximum transparency from the first moment and done its very best to get information out about the problem, and if they could release partial results, to get that out as well. So that's the answer to one of those questions. Now, on the second one, I went to a caucus myself, and it was in Dubuque. And Dubuque is a historic Union town, a pretty democratic town, but also a place where presumably Joe Biden would have done quite well. I actually expected him to do pretty well in Dubuque. It's one of the reasons I went there. When they did the initial breakup, just in my caucus, Joe Biden was barely running, he's essentially running about as well as Andrew Yang. As the night went on, Biden attracted some Klobuchar supporters and got to baseline viability. But in Dubuque, again, a town where I thought he would have been doing significantly better, he was a weak fourth. And I heard from across Iowa, anecdotally from precincts all over, that his numbers were falling way short of what was expected. And that's significant because, the Iowa caucuses produce many winners and some losers. You can finish second in Iowa and claim a better than expected run. You can even finish down the line, like say an Andrew Yang, and still point to a lot of people who showed up and were enthusiastic about your candidacy. And so not having those numbers creates a lack of clarity. It makes it hard for people who have done well to capitalize on their show of strength. But it also makes it hard for people trying to analyze the race and get a sense of who's got things going on. And that's where the Biden factor comes up, because if indeed Biden, the former vice president of the United States, running as the presumed frontrunner for most of this race, even in Iowa, and certainly still talked about as a frontrunner nationally, finished a weak fourth. That's significant, and it's frankly the kind of thing that should have been a part of the discussion last night and this morning. And if I could add one final thing on the complexity of all this, we're on a State of the Union day, right? And so the timelines of news cycles become important. And if you don't get the results of the Iowa caucuses, clear and well presented pretty quickly today, we're going to be into watching Donald Trump give his State of the Union address. And in effect, the ability of a Democratic winner in Iowa to communicate about that win is truncated. It's limited. And that if it was a really close race, that would be something you understood. But if it's just a follow-up by the people that are supposed to be getting the results in, they're affecting a national race for president of the United States, one that they claim to want to they said they wanted to be the first. They wanted to get this started. And if they mess it up this badly, it really raises questions about whether they should be doing it.
And this is not the only reason. I mean, you have, so much focus last night on the Iowa caucuses, and cameras took, on the networks, took you into all these caucuses, overwhelmingly white. Iowa's, well over 90% white. When the Democratic Party, it's like, half people of color. And this is the first election contest, and that determines so much. And so you have that on top of the crisis that took place last night.
And Amy, if I could add one other thing too. The caucuses are long. You have to get there around 7 o'clock or before, really, to get in. Then you take an hour, or even an hour and a half, in some cases longer than that. And for working class folks, folks who work nights, that can be really tough. There were a few efforts to try and set up satellite caucuses and other systems, but basically, these caucuses have very low turnout as compared to primaries. And as I was sitting there last night watching the caucus I was at, play out, you had people walking back and forth across the room and counts and recounts. And it had a theater to it. It was interesting. But at the end of the night, you had to ask yourself, wouldn't it be easier if you just let these people vote? Remember, for better or worse, we have set up a nominating process in this country, in the Democratic Party, where you go very quickly from the caucuses in Iowa to the primary in New Hampshire to, you go on to South Carolina and Nevada. And if you've got sort of lingering problems like this, it really does raise concerns, and it undermines confidence, frankly. And I have to tell you, I was at the caucus that I went to. There's a massive number of young people who are caucusing for the first time. They are entering the political process, and they are coming with a lot of hope, a lot of idealism, a lot of belief that they can have an impact, and then to have it glitching and messing up and to have controversies, that's just exactly wrong.